The night still clings to the village like a heavy cloak, its weight pressing against the frost-bitten rooftops and the narrow dirt paths that wind between them. And you wake before the sun, not because you want to, but because the cold quietly insists that you must, letting a thin ribbon of icy air slip across your face, reminding you that warmth is a thing earned, guarded, and often lost without notice. Your bed is nothing more than a shallow wooden frame stuffed with straw that crackles softly beneath you, while the wool blanket pulled over your shoulders carries the faint scent of smoke, sheep, and old winters that came long before you were born. And for a while you simply lie there, listening to the hush of a world still half asleep, feeling the ache in your fingers, the stiffness in your joints, the weight of a morning that belongs more to survival than to comfort, because medieval mornings never truly begin with the sun. They begin with the fire's absence, its fading, its fragile last breath hidden somewhere within the ashes. You shift slowly so the cold doesn't bite too sharply. And as your breath rises in a pale cloud above you, you remember what the elders always say: losing the night's ember is losing half the day. Your hands search for your rough wool tunic in the near complete darkness, the fabric stiff with yesterday's dampness, and pulling it over your head feels like wrestling with a stubborn animal. But eventually you manage, pushing your feet onto the wooden floor that burns with cold like fresh snow, making you wince as you stand. Across the room, your younger brother stirs, though he doesn't speak, simply pulls his blanket tighter, hoping the morning might forget him. But in this life, morning forgets no one. So you cross the small space to the heartha shallow stone pit, blackened by years of soot, kneeling to brush away the soft gray ash with your fingertips, searching for the faintest glow, the tiniest pulse of life that might still remain from last night's fire, whispering quietly to yourself, because even your thoughts feel too loud at this hour. There is a single dim ember hiding beneath the ash, small as a lentil, fragile as a dream. And for a moment, you simply breathe at it, watching it pulse weakly, like the dying heartbeat of a creature waiting to wake. Carefully, you gather a few strands of dry straw, placing them around it like a nest, cupping your hands to shield it from drafts, breathing a slow, warm breath until the orange pulse deepens, softens, steadies. It is not a fire, not yet, but it is enough to warm a traveler's hope, enough to cook a morning meal if you are patient, enough to keep the room from sinking into the kind of cold that makes bones feel ancient. And as you coax the ember back toward life, you think of how people outside your world imagine survival is about strength and weapons and daring. Yet in truth, it begins here, in a quiet moment with nothing but ash and breath and the knowledge passed from one winter to the next. The knowledge that a single ember, carefully kept, can save a family, a house, a life, and perhaps the whole village when storms come early and linger long. By the time the ember finally catches the straw and a delicate flame begins to rise, soft and trembling, you feel the room shift around you, not warmer yet, but alive again, as if this tiny spark is enough to remind the world that the day has begun. The village is barely waking when you step outside, closing the wooden door behind you with a soft thud that seems louder than it should in the early silence. And the air meets you like a wall sharp, ancient with cold, that feels older than the houses around you. A cold that settles into your eyelashes and paints every rooftop with a thin shimmer of frost. The sky is the color of worn steel, neither night nor morning, suspended in that quiet hour when even the birds hesitate to begin their songs. And as you pull your wool cloak tight around your shoulders, the world smells of smoke, damp straw, and the faint sourness drifting from the village midden heap, all of it familiar in a way that settles the mind even while the body shivers. The path leading up the hill is hard-packed earth, frozen solid, each step echoing dully as your boots press into the frost. And ahead of you, a lone figure moves slowly, steady as the sun that refuses to rise. Just yet Master Wulfrun, the Keeper of Embers. His back slightly bent beneath the weight of decades spent guarding what little warmth the village can claim. He walks without a torch, his footsteps sure and unhurried, as though he has memorized every stone and crooked route on this trail. And for a moment you simply watch him, the way the edge of his cloak sways like a shadow unrolling itself along the ground. The way the small wooden box tucked under his arm seems more precious than any treasure. You hurry after him, breath puffing in faint white clouds, lungs stinging in the cold. And when you finally catch up, he doesn't greet you with words, only a slight nod, as if to say that arriving on time is the greeting itself. Together you move along the narrow path that winds between skeletal winter trees, whose branches scratch lightly against one another in the breeze, making a sound like old whispers. And though the forest ahead looks dark, there is nothing urgent about Master Wulfrun's stride, nothing rushed or sharp, because in his world, survival is never frantic, it is deliberate, patient, practiced. After a while, he finally speaks, his voice low and rough, shaped by smoke and the weight of long winters, telling you that the path you walk each dawn is older than the village, older than the stones that line the fields, that people have been walking this same trail for generations, carrying fire from one place to another, keeping embers alive when storms would have wiped out whole communities, if not for a careful hand and a steady breath. As he talks, the hill grows steeper, your legs growing warm beneath the cold air, and the first pale line of morning finally brushes the horizon behind you, painting a soft glow across the frost, like the world is remembering how to wake. Master Wulfrun continues, explaining, not lecturing, just speaking in the calm way of someone who knows you're listening, about how fire was once the most guarded possession a household could have, more than tools, more than food, because when the nights stretched long and hungry, a spark meant survival, and a mistake meant death. He tells you that there were winters when people would walk miles just to borrow a living coal from a neighbor's hearth, cupping it in clay, herbs, and ash to keep the ember breathing for hours. And as you listen, the modern world, its noise, its lights, its constant hum, feels impossibly far away, replaced by this slow, quiet rhythm of boots crunching frost and an old man carrying the memory of 1,000 forgotten winters. By the time you reach the stone hut at the top of the hill, the air around you feels different, not warmer, but older, as though the place itself remembers every ember ever kept alive within its walls. And you realize that today, you're not just walking a path, you're inheriting one. The stone hut sits at the hill's crest like a silent guardian, its rough walls blackened from years of smoke, And as you step closer, the scent of herbs, soot, and damp clay fills your nostrils, wrapping around you like a blanket warmer than any wool could provide. The door groans softly as Master Wolfram pushes it open, revealing shelves lined with small clay pots, each carefully sealed with wax and wood. And a faint red glow flickers from within them, casting the room in a dim, almost magical light that dances across your wide eyes, revealing tools, bundles of dried reeds, and tiny piles of ash meticulously arranged as if each had its own purpose and story. You notice that the air is still heavier than outside, carrying the warmth of fires kept alive not for cooking, but for life itself. And Master Wolfram moves with slow precision, selecting a clay pot as if it were a precious gem, his fingers deftly removing the wooden plug to peer inside, the glow illuminating his weathered face lined with wrinkles and decades of winters survived. You lean closer, mesmerized as the ember inside pulses softly, a living thing in its own right, and he murmurs almost to himself that this one has burned for 36 days. Not a word of pride, only matter-of-fact acknowledgement. And when you ask how such a thing is possible, he only smiles faintly, shaking his head, for the secret lies not in magic, nor in brute skill, but in care, patience, and understanding the fire's rhythm like a heartbeat that must never be neglected. You watch as he replaces the plug with meticulous care, marking the clay with small notches, each mark a record of life preserved. And in that quiet moment, you realize that a medieval village's survival is a delicate balance between the living and the dying, the flame and the ash, the keeper and the forgotten art. The room smells faintly of smoke and something earthy you cannot name, and the soft red glow makes everything appear softer, slower, safer, and you feel the heavy chill of the morning fade slightly from your bones, replaced by a calm that comes from witnessing a routine older than any person you've met, a rhythm older than the village itself. Master Wolfram walks to a shelf lined with bundles of reeds, selecting one and explaining in his low measured tone how the fire bundle is more valuable than gold, more crucial than weapons, for travelers, for families, for a world where matches and lighters do not exist. And as he lifts the reed and gestures toward the ember, you realize that the secret of survival is not strength, nor speed, nor daring, but quiet knowledge, patience, and tending, for one careless moment could snuff out what generations have kept alive. The soft glow from the pots flickers across the walls as he continues, speaking in a rhythm as gentle as the embers themselves, telling you that even the smallest spark, if nurtured, can warm a home, cook a meal, and keep a soul alive through the coldest night. And you cannot help but feel that something ancient and vital has settled in your chest, a quiet understanding that the keeper of embers is more than a man, he is a vessel of survival, a bridge between forgotten winters and the world that you now live in. The longer you watch, the more the hut seems alive, breathing along with you, whispering old truths in a language made of smoke, warmth, and careful, measured movements. And for the first time this morning, the world outside seems distant, irrelevant, and you are here in the quiet glow, learning what it means to truly keep the fire alive. You follow Master Wolfram as he moves slowly through the hut, each step deliberate, each gesture measured. And as your eyes wander over the carefully arranged clay pots, bundles of dry herbs, and stacks of reeds, you begin to understand that nothing here is random. Every item has its place, every ember its purpose, every mark on the clay a silent record of time, patience, and survival. And as he pauses before a particularly large pot in the corner, reverence in the way he handles it, you notice the faint glow inside, deeper, steadier, almost proud in its quiet persistence. And he speaks, still softly, explaining that this pot has been burning for nearly 2 months, a life force nurtured through countless hands, mornings and nights. And you can't help but feel the weight of generations resting in this one fragile vessel. The flame, a keeper of stories, of winters survived, of meals cooked and warmth given to those who might not otherwise endure. He gestures toward a hollow reed, thick as your thumb and nearly a foot long, explaining its importance, how it acts as a conduit for the flame, a bridge between the dying ember and the new spark. And as he holds it up, you see that even such a simple object is treated with the utmost care, chosen for its strength, its dryness, its reliability. And in that moment, you realize that medieval survival is not about heroism or chance, but about ritual, observation, and respect for the natural rhythms of fire, for the way it breathes, for the way it falters and revives with attention. You kneel beside him as he demonstrates the technique, showing how a gentle puff of breath, a careful placement of straw, and the right touch can coax a faint ember into a living flame. And your eyes follow every movement, every soft glow that dances in the dim light, feeling your own pulse slow, your mind quiet, and a strange calm settles over you, the sort that comes from understanding something vital, something older than yourself, something that might save a life. He continues, explaining that fire was more than warmth, more than cooking. It was security, comfort, and survival wrapped into a single fragile form, and that losing it meant not only cold and hunger, but wasted labor, lost wood, and the quiet despair of a household left to darkness. You practice carefully, mimicking the soft exhalation, the gentle coaxing of the straw, the way the ember responds to patience rather than force. And even as your fingers ache in the cold air that sneaks through the stone walls, there is a strange satisfaction, a rhythm, a connection to every winter, every villager, every keeper of embers who had lived before you, all of them present in the simple act of tending a small flame. And as you watch it finally rise steadily, warm and alive, you feel a quiet pride, not loud or boastful, only a deep understanding that this small, fragile flame is more than just fire, is life, continuity, memory, and the first true lesson of survival in a world that demands respect for the smallest things. Outside, the faint light of dawn stretches across the frost-covered village. But inside the hut, you feel that you have entered a different rhythm, one where patience, care, and attention to detail are worth more than any sword or shield. And for a moment, the world feels simpler, quieter, colder, yet full of life, pulsing gently in the warmth of this carefully nurtured ember. The first hints of sunlight begin to stretch across the frozen village, filtering through the gaps in the thatched roofs and casting long, soft shadows on the frost-bitten ground, while inside the stone hut, The warm glow of the carefully tended embers fills the space with a quiet, golden light that seems to pulse with life itself. And as you sit on the worn wooden stool beside Master Wulfrin, the keeper of embers, you realize that this small fire is more than warmth. It is the beginning of the day, the heartbeat of survival, and the thread that ties the past to the present. He moves with slow, precise motions, gathering small strips of dry straw and tiny twigs, placing them carefully atop the glowing embers, coaxing them into a steady flame, and you follow his movements, mimicking every breath, every gentle adjustment, feeling the pulse of the fire respond to your attention. And in the flickering light, the clay pots on the shelves seem to hum softly, as though recognizing the care that goes into sustaining them. The hut smells of smoke, dried herbs, and clay, a comforting scent that makes the cold outside almost forgettable, and your stomach growls faintly, reminding you that survival is not only about warmth, yet there is no rush, no frantic hurry, only the slow, deliberate rhythm of tending the flame. Master Wulfrin fetches a small pot from the shelf, carefully loosening the wax plug to reveal coals that have remained alive through the night, and he explains, in his low, measured voice, that the fire must always be watched, fed, and respected, for a day without it can mean wasted effort, frozen food, or even danger from the cold that lies in wait beyond the hut. You help him transfer some of the embers to a small cooking vessel, and as the first bit of water hisses when it meets the heat, you feel a profound sense of satisfaction in the simplicity of the act, the quiet miracle of creating warmth and sustenance from patience and care. And as he instructs you on stirring, adding fuel, and maintaining the delicate balance, you understand that medieval survival is not learned in a single night, but through repetition, observation, and a deep respect for the smallest elements of life. Outside, the village begins to stir. Faint sounds of movement, the crunch of boots on frost, the distant lowing of animals. Yet, within the hut, time seems to stretch, slow, almost suspended, as if the fire itself demands this reverence, this careful attention, and you sit back slightly, letting the warmth creep into your stiff fingers and aching limbs, noticing how the orange glow dances across your face, soft and steady, a gentle reminder that life continues, that survival is an art, and that every ember, every careful breath, every whisper of attention matters. By the time the small meal is ready, steam rising softly from the cooking pot, you feel a quiet pride, a deep connection to every villager, every keeper who tended the flames before you, and you understand, perhaps for the first time, that the secret of medieval survival is not found in grand feats or heroic deeds, but in these small, measured acts, the patience to coax life from ash, the understanding that warmth, light, and care are far more precious than gold. And as you finally take your first sip of hot broth, you feel the day truly begin, carried forward by a small, steadfast fire that has survived the night and now lives within you. The village lies wrapped in a fragile hush as dawn creeps over the horizon, pale light stretching across frost-lined streets and thatched roofs that glint with the faint shimmer of ice. And you step out of the small hut into the cold that bites gently at your cheeks, wool cloak wrapped tightly around your shoulders, the familiar scent of smoke, damp earth, and straw filling your senses, grounding you in this ancient morning that feels unchanged for centuries. Your boots crunch against the frozen ground, each step deliberate, echoing softly in the stillness as you follow the narrow path toward the village square, where small stone cottages sit quietly, their doors closed, shutters frost-covered, and only the faint curl of smoke from distant chimneys hints at life within. The air is sharp, yet clean, carrying whispers of animals stirring, of dogs barking somewhere in the distance. And as you take it all in, the knowledge settles slowly into your mind. Survival here is not hurried. It is slow, methodical, and deliberate, as it has always been. Every breath measured, every movement intentional, for the cold does not forgive negligence. The keeper's words from yesterday echo softly in your thoughts, reminding you that fire is more than warmth, that every ember is a treasure, a lifeline, a heartbeat in a world that offers no second chances when the frost bites too deep. And you feel a quiet responsibility, a growing awareness that the lessons of the night are not just about flame, but about patience, observation, and respect for the rhythm of life around you. Villagers begin to stir, their movements muted, careful, carrying water from the well, tending small livestock, the faint smell of wet hay and wood smoke rising to meet the cold air. And as you walk past, you notice the deliberate efficiency of their work. Nothing wasted, no motion careless. Each task a small act of survival, encoded over generations. And you understand that this discipline, this careful choreography, is what keeps a village alive through winters that could crush the unprepared. You find Master Wolfron waiting by the edge of the square, his cloak dusted with frost, hands tucked into leather gloves, and he gestures silently for you to follow him toward the forest path where the first lesson of the day awaits. A path worn smooth by decades of repeated steps, yet still treacherous in the ice. And you quicken your pace, careful to mirror his even stride, letting your mind absorb every detail, the way snow clings to the branches above, the crunch of frozen leaves beneath your boots, the pale mist rising from the shallow stream that cuts through the village outskirts, carrying with it the faint temps of minerals and cold water that could sustain life if properly used. Master Wolfram stops occasionally to point out small signs, the angle of a fallen branch, the subtle curve of an animal track in the snow, the way frost melts in patches where sunlight finds a momentary path. And you note everything with a quiet focus, realizing that survival is a careful reading of the world, an understanding of subtle rhythms that modern tools cannot replicate, that knowledge handed down in silence, in touch, in breath, is far more valuable than any book or map. By the time the path winds back toward the village edge, the air feels less biting, the frost less hostile, and within you there is a soft, steady warmth that comes not from fire alone, but from understanding, from learning to see the world as it truly is, fragile, beautiful, and demanding of attention. And you know that today, like every day, the village will survive because of these quiet lessons, because of patience, and because of the careful hands that tend both ember and life. The path winds gently upward, past the edge of the village, where the forest begins. And as you walk behind Master Wolfram, the keeper of embers, the cold seems sharper here, biting through the layers of wool and leather. Yet the rhythm of your steps matches his, slow, measured, almost ritualistic. Because in this world, every motion matters. Every misstep risks a slip, a bruise, or worse. And you understand that medieval survival is not born of luck, but of careful attention, of learning to read the smallest signs, a frozen leaf, the slight bend of a branch, the faint scent of smoke carried from a neighbor's hearth. Master Wulfrun stops at a small clearing, hands moving deliberately as he begins to unpack simple tools from his leather satchel, each one worn but meticulously maintained. And you watch as he lifts a flint, a small iron striker, bundles of dried tinder carefully wrapped in cloth, and a few clay vessels, his fingers tracing the items as if greeting old friends, demonstrating to you that these simple things, when used with care, hold the power to sustain life through the coldest winters. He gestures for you to kneel beside him, and with quiet precision, he shows how to strike the flint, to catch the smallest spark, to coax it onto the tinder, and then to protect it, nurture it, until it grows into a flame that could boil water, cook a meal, or warm a frozen room. And though you have seen fire before, here it feels sacred, fragile, alive, a heartbeat in the frozen silence of the woods. And you learn quickly that haste is the enemy of survival. The keeper does not rush, does not speak loudly, only murmurs instructions that drift softly on the crisp morning air. And you absorb every detail, how to position your hands, the angle of the flint, the patience needed to breathe gently on the tiniest ember without smothering it. And as the first flicker of flame emerges, a tiny golden tongue dancing on the tinder, a soft pride swells inside you, quiet and deep, knowing that life here is preserved by the skill of careful hands. Knowledge passed down in silence, by observation and practice, rather than written words. Beyond the clearing, snow-laden branches form a delicate canopy, filtering pale light that glints softly on frozen surfaces, making the ember seem almost magical. Yet Master Wulfrun reminds you that magic has little to do with survival. It is repetition, attention, and respect for materials that make life possible. And as you continue practicing, coaxing one ember after another, you feel the connection to every villager, every generation that walked these woods, that carried fire from home to home, ensuring that even the coldest winters could be endured. He shows how small variations, dry leaves, choice of wood, the angle of a spark can make the difference between life and a wasted morning. And though your fingers are stiff, your face numb, there is a calm satisfaction in knowing that with care, patience, and respect, you can preserve warmth, light, and even hope itself. When, at last, the small flame steadies and glows reliably in the clay vessel, the keeper nods, silent approval in his eyes. And you realize that these tools, humble and unassuming, are the backbone of survival, far more valuable than gold or weapons. And that, in this village, life persists not through bravery alone, but through knowledge, ritual, and the quiet art of tending the smallest flame, a truth as steady and enduring as the frost-covered forest surrounding you. The morning continues to unfold with a slow, deliberate rhythm, the soft crunch of frozen leaves beneath your boots, mixing with the occasional distant bleat of livestock. And as you follow Master Wulfrun through the village outskirts, you begin to notice the meticulous care woven into every detail of survival here. From the way bundles of firewood are stacked neatly against the cottages to the careful storage of dried herbs and grain, all arranged to preserve warmth, flavor, and life during the long, unforgiving winter months. He leads you toward a small outbuilding behind the main square, its wooden walls rough but solid, where supplies are kept safe from moisture and frost. And as he opens the door, the aroma of dried plants and smoked meat wafts toward you, comforting, grounding, a reminder that survival is as much about planning and foresight as it is about tending the fire. Inside, bundles of straw, tightly woven mats, clay pots, and small earthen jars are stacked in quiet order, and Wolfram explains how each item is chosen for reliability. Not luxury firewood that burns evenly, straw that retains heat, clay vessels that conduct warmth gently, and herbs that preserve both scent and medicinal properties. You follow him as he demonstrates gathering the supplies needed for the day, his movements slow but precise, showing how even the smallest action, lifting a pot, choosing a twig from the pile, affects the rhythm of the household. And you begin to feel the weight of responsibility that each item carries, understanding that medieval survival demands constant awareness and respect for what is easily overlooked in modern life. As you carry your own bundle of dry wood, the cold wind brushing your cheeks, you notice how Wolfram carefully selects each piece, tapping it lightly to test its dryness, its readiness, teaching silently that the right fire depends on both knowledge and attention, and the lesson is subtle, learned not through words alone, but by watching, mimicking, and absorbing the rhythm of decades of experience. Outside, the sun creeps higher, its pale light reflecting off the frost, softening the edges of the world. Yet the forest beyond seems endless and indifferent, a reminder that nature follows its own rules, and that the ember, though small, is your ally, your lifeline, the fragile thread that connects labor to warmth, patience to sustenance, and observation to survival. You stack your gathered materials neatly at the hut's entrance as Wolfram begins the ritual of inspecting and sorting, showing how even minor adjustments, moving one bundle slightly closer, adjusting the angle of a pot can, ensure that the fire will start easily, that the morning meal will be cooked, and that the cold will not claim its victims unnecessarily. By the time the task is complete, you feel a quiet sense of accomplishment, the rhythm of survival settling into your bones as surely as the frost settles on the village rooftops, and you realize that everything here, the wood, the straw, the clay, the careful hands that tend them, carries a story of preparation, patience, and the timeless art of enduring winter. Lessons that, if forgotten, could turn even the smallest frost into danger. And that survival in this place and time is less about courage or strength than about respect for the small, essential acts that keep life going. The pale morning grows slowly brighter, yet the frost clinging to rooftops, straw, and earth seems to hold onto the last of the night, reminding you that winter here is patient, unyielding, and that every motion must be measured, every breath accounted for. As you follow Master Wolfram through the quiet village, toward a small stone courtyard where the villagers begin their early routines, the keeper moves with careful precision, gesturing for you to observe. and you watch as a young girl carries a small bundle of firewood to her family's hearth, as an elderly man stokes a low, struggling flame in a clay pot. And as the villagers go about these simple tasks, the rhythm of survival becomes clear. It is repetition, attention, and respect for the cold that surrounds them. A knowledge honed over countless winters that demands patience rather than haste, and you feel yourself absorbing it with quiet awe. Wolfren kneels beside a faintly glowing ember, guiding your hands as you gently feed it straw, the soft orange light reflecting on your frozen fingers, and you realize that these small acts, nurturing the ember, adjusting the angle of a twig, selecting dry leaves from a bundler, the foundation of life in a world where heat is scarce and nights are long. And even a minor mistake could cost warmth, nourishment, or hours of labor. He pauses occasionally to point out subtle signs, the way frost melts on certain stones, the faint tracks of animals scavenging for food, the tiny cracks in frozen streams where water still moves beneath, teaching you to read the landscape like a living map, where each observation holds meaning and offers guidance. And you notice how his calm, deliberate manner turns every lesson into a quiet meditation, a rhythm of survival that slows your own heartbeat, softening the sharp edge of the cold around you. As you assist in transferring small bundles of straw and wood to the hearth, Wolfren continues to explain that medieval survival depends not only on fire, but also on the careful balance of resources, timing, and understanding the environment. For a day spent rushing, wasting wood, or neglecting the smallest ember could undo all the careful work of previous nights. And the responsibility of keeping this knowledge alive is heavier than any physical task. A weight measured in patience, attention, and respect. The morning air, crisp and clean, fills your lungs as you work, and you begin to notice a rhythm in every movement, the sound of straw rustling, the subtle crackle of waking embers, the muted footsteps of villagers moving with quiet purpose, all converging into a slow, steady pattern that marks the flow of life in winter. A rhythm older than any one person, older than the village itself. By the time the lesson concludes, you feel a sense of quiet accomplishment. The ember you nurtured now steady and strong, and with it comes understanding. Survival is never frantic, never loud, never hurried, but a series of deliberate, patient acts, repeated until they become instinct, and you realize that the smallest care, the gentlest attention, the quietest observation is what allows life to persist in the harshest of winters. A truth that once learned will guide you through every cold dawn, every frozen night, and every silent, frost-bound path that the village holds. As the day slowly tilts toward evening, a pale, cold light filtering through the village streets, the air grows quieter, carrying the soft whispers of wind over frozen rooftops and the muted sounds of livestock settling into their pens. And you follow Master Wolfren back to the stone hut at the hilltop, feeling the rhythm of the day settle into your bones. A slow, deliberate pulse that mirrors the careful, measured pace of medieval survival. And as you enter the familiar warmth of the hut, the scent of smoke, dried herbs, and clay wraps around you like a protective blanket, comforting in its simplicity and the quiet proof of life preserved through skill and patience. The small embers you tended in the morning now glow steadily, casting a soft orange light on the walls, and Wolfram gestures for you to kneel beside them once more, showing how even in the evening, the ember demands attention. A reminder that survival is a constant cycle of care, observation, and deliberate action, not only through the day, but from one season to the next. And as you watch the tiny flame respond to gentle breaths, careful placement of straw, and the precise motion of a hand, you begin to understand that this is the foundation of life in this village, where warmth, nourishment, and continuity are born not of magic or wealth, but of patience, respect, and the quiet, repetitive acts that sustain every household. Outside, the frost glimmers under the fading light, and you can hear distant children calling softly as they complete chores, the muted clatter of buckets and tools carrying through the cold air, each sound a reminder that life continues even in the harshest months, and that every ember, every bundle of wood, every carefully chosen piece of straw is part of a delicate balance maintained through generations. Wolfram speaks softly about the importance of reflection, of observing the day's work, noting what succeeded, what faltered, and how even the smallest oversight could have consequences. And you nod silently, absorbing the rhythm, the weight of responsibility, and the satisfaction of steady, deliberate labor. You carefully feed the ember once more, watching it flare gently, and feel a deep sense of connection to the keeper, to the village, to the long line of ancestors who tended fires through winters more brutal than this. And as night deepens outside the stone walls, the hut becomes a cocoon of warmth and quiet, the soft glow of the fire illuminating the straw mattress, the shelves of clay pots, the bundles of herbs, and your own reflection in the calm light, teaching you that survival is not loud, not heroic, not dramatic, but quiet, patient, and continuous, and that through such acts, even the harshest winter can be endured. By the time the evening meal is finished, steam rising gently from a small pot over the fire, you feel the day settle behind you like soft snow, a quiet understanding that warmth and knowledge are woven together in careful acts, repeated endlessly. And as you finally rest beside the ember, watching the flicker of orange glow against the stone walls, you know that this is the rhythm of survival, the heartbeat of a village that has endured through centuries, and that even in the deepest winter, with patience and care, life persists quietly, steadily, and with an enduring grace. The day begins slowly, the pale winter light just brushing over the rooftops of the village, frost clinging stubbornly to the straw, wood, and cobblestones. And you follow Master Wolfram up the hill once more, each step measured, deliberate, as the cold nips at your exposed face and hands, reminding you that comfort is earned, not given. The path narrows, weaving between skeletal trees dusted with frost, their bare branches scratching faintly against each other. And the quiet crunch of your boots on frozen earth is the only sound besides the soft whisper of wind, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke, wood, and the earthy aroma of frozen soil, grounding you in the rhythm of the morning, making the world feel both vast and intimately alive. As Wolfram approaches a low stone building partially hidden behind a copse of trees, he pauses, glancing back at you with calm eyes that seem to measure not just your steps, but your awareness, your patience, your readiness to absorb the lessons that this hidden workshop holds. And when he opens the heavy wooden door, a wave of warmth and the familiar smell of herbs, clay, and faint smoke greets you, enveloping the small space in a comforting hush that stands in stark contrast to the biting cold outside. Inside, shelves lined with clay pots, bundles of dried reeds, and small tools form a silent mosaic of medieval survival, each item meticulously arranged, each ember preserved as if it were a living entity, and you watch, mesmerized, as Wulfrun moves deliberately from shelf to shelf, selecting pots, checking the glow of tiny embers, prying open wooden plugs to reveal the faint red pulse of life within, marking the clay with notches to track the days of care, and explaining in soft, measured tones that these tiny fires, tended with patience and respect, are the lifeblood of the village, the quiet force that allows every household to endure long, unforgiving winters. As you kneel beside him, observing his hands, you notice the subtle rhythms of survival encoded in his movements, the way he lifts a pot, the angle at which he shields an ember, the gentle puff of breath that coaxes it back to life, and you feel a quiet awe settle over you, realizing that medieval life depended not on grand feats or strength alone, but on this careful, deliberate stewardship of fire, the knowledge that a spark, nurtured and respected, could mean the difference between cold despair and warmth, between hunger and sustenance. Wulfrun shows you the hollow reeds used to transfer embers, explaining how travelers carry them to ensure their flame survives the journey, more valuable than gold, more crucial than weapons. And as you practice handling one yourself, the fire responding slowly, you feel an intimate connection to the generations who have walked this path, who have held these embers in careful hands, teaching each apprentice that survival is a quiet art, that every small act, repeated with care, sustains life. The hidden workshop, the faint orange glow, the smell of clay, wood, and herbs, the slow, deliberate rhythm of Wulfrun's instructions, and the frost-tinged light filtering through the tiny window all combine to form a soft, immersive world where patience is power, observation is strength, and even the smallest ember carries the weight of survival itself, settling in your chest like a steady heartbeat that will guide you through the day, the week, and the long winters ahead. The morning deepens, the frost outside glittering faintly under the pale winter sun, while inside the hidden workshop, a soft orange glow from dozens of carefully tended embers casts long, gentle shadows across the walls, and you kneel beside Master Wulfrun, feeling the warmth creep slowly into your cold fingers as he demonstrates the subtle, almost imperceptible motions needed to coax fire from the tiniest spark. His hands move deliberately, tilting the clay pot just so, shielding the fragile ember with a careful curl of fingers, puffing gently, almost reverently, and you watch every movement, trying to internalize the rhythm, the patience, the quiet attention that separates a living flame from a dying one, understanding that in a world without matches or lighters, survival depended entirely on this slow, deliberate mastery of fire, and that one careless motion could undo hours, even days, of careful work. Wulfrun murmurs instructions softly, his voice blending with the faint crackle of the embers, guiding your breath, your touch, your attention to every minute detail, and you begin to realize that medieval survival was less about strength or speed, and more about observation, repetition, and respect for the elements. A slow meditation in motion that connects the apprentice to generations who had walked the same path, tended the same flames, and endured the harsh winters with nothing but knowledge, patience, and careful hands. You practice repeatedly, each attempt teaching you something new: how to adjust the angle of your breath, how to shield the ember from drafts, how to select the right strand of straw to feed it. And with each small success, the tiny flame grows steadier, a living testament to the quiet power of patience and skill, filling the workshop with a soft, steady light that warms more than just your hands, settles into your chest, embedding the rhythm of survival deep in your mind, slow, deliberate, eternal. Wulfrun explains that this art is not simply about starting a fire, but about maintaining life itself, and that a single ember preserved carefully could sustain a household, provide warmth, cook food, and even save a traveler from the biting cold. And as you follow his instructions, mimicking each motion, listening to the soft hiss and crackle of the growing flame, you feel a profound connection to the knowledge passed silently through countless generations, a fragile thread linking past, present, and future. Outside the workshop, the winter world moves on its slow, patient course. Frost melting slightly in patches where the sun finds purchase, animals stirring, snow shifting silently, but inside, time feels suspended, measured only by the gentle pulse of fire, the rhythm of breath, the deliberate placement of straw and wood. And you sense that this quiet attention, this careful care, is what allows a village to endure, what transforms survival from mere endurance into mastery. And as the ember finally grows into a reliable flame, steady and warm, you feel an almost spiritual satisfaction, a deep, meditative understanding that the smallest, quietest acts, repeated with care and observation, are the true heart of life. And that this knowledge, slow, deliberate, and almost sacred, is more valuable than any weapon, any gold, any fleeting comfort. And as the soft orange light dances across Wulfrun's weathered face, you know that the art of coaxing fire is the very backbone of survival, a rhythm as old as winter itself. The sun climbs higher, its pale light spilling softly into the hidden workshop, casting a gentle glow on the shelves lined with clay pots, bundles of reeds, and carefully stacked firewood. And as you kneel beside Master Wulfrun, you begin to notice the subtle details that make the difference between a dying ember and a flame that can survive the longest, coldest nights. He moves with quiet precision, selecting a small, nearly extinguished ember, placing it within a hollow reed, and explaining in soft, measured tones that preservation is an art, a patient, deliberate practice that requires understanding the nature of fire itself, the way it breathes, the way it responds to gentle attention, and how even the smallest ember, if treated with care, can provide life, warmth, and hope in a harsh, unyielding world. You watch as he wraps it carefully in cloth, shielding it from the drafty stone walls, and as he hands the reed to you, you feel the weight of responsibility settle in your hands, not heavy in a physical sense, but heavier in meaning, because within this tiny vessel rests more than phlegm. It carries the knowledge of generations, the promise of warmth, the potential to sustain life through frost and darkness. And he instructs you to carry it with care, to tend it gently, to never rush, to never force. And in that moment, the rhythm of medieval survival becomes tangible, almost meditative. Each motion a deliberate act connecting you to every keeper who has preserved fire for centuries. Outside, the village begins to stir, faint sounds of life drifting through the cold morning air. But inside the hut, time seems suspended, marked only by the soft crackle and pulse of the ember, the gentle hum of life preserved through careful attention. And as you practice the art of preserving and transferring flame from reed to clay pot, you feel a quiet understanding settling deep within you, a rhythm that tells you survival is less about heroism, more about patience, observation, and deliberate care. Wolfrun explains that the wrong breath, the misplaced straw, or a single careless motion could extinguish a flame, wasting hours of work and threatening the household's warmth. And you begin to notice how every tiny movement, the angle of a hand, the tilt of a pot, the gentle puff of airs, a form of meditation, a slow dance between ember and human, teaching respect for the fragile power that fire holds, and how mastery of it is essential for survival. As you transfer the ember back into a small clay vessel, watching the glow steady and grow under careful attention, you feel a sense of quiet pride, a connection to the rhythm of life in this frozen world, and to the generations of villagers who have depended on such delicate, deliberate practices to endure the long winters. Wolfrun's calm, measured presence, the faint orange glow, the smell of smoke, herbs, and clay, and the soft light from the small window create an immersive cocoon, a private world where patience, observation, and care are rewarded with life itself. And by the time you finish your practice, the ember burns steadily, a small yet profound testament to the quiet, enduring art of preserving life. And you realize that survival in this village is not granted. It is earned, nurtured, and carried forward, one careful motion, one gentle breath, one patient flame at a time. The day stretches onward, the pale winter light filtering through the small window of the stone workshop, casting long, soft shadows across shelves stacked with clay pots, bundles of reeds, and meticulously prepared firewood. And as you sit beside Master Wolfrun, the keeper of embers, you begin to understand more clearly that fire here is far more than a tool. It is life itself, the fragile heartbeat of the village, a small, living force that must be nurtured and protected with patience, respect, and deliberate attention. Wolfrun moves slowly, selecting a small glowing pot, lifting it with careful reverence, and as he opens the wooden plug, the faint pulse of the ember illuminates his lined face, his eyes calm yet sharp, reminding you that knowledge, patience, and care are as essential as the flame itself, for without them, survival falters. He instructs you in the gentle art of feeding the flame, showing how to adjust straw, breathe softly, and balance heat without smothering the ember. And each motion, repeated countless times over decades, becomes a rhythm, a meditation, a deliberate dance between life and its preservation. And you feel yourself sinking with it, your own movements slowing, becoming intentional, each breath measured, each touch mindful, as though the workshop itself guides your hands. Outside, Frost glints on the thatched roofs and the frozen earth, silent witnesses to a world that is both harsh and beautiful. And you realize that fire is not merely a source of warmth or a way to cook food, is the keeper of memory, comfort, and continuity, the thread that connects generations of villagers who have endured long, cruel winters. And Wulfrun's calm instructions emphasize that this fragile, flickering force, if neglected, can undo the labor of days, leaving a household cold, hungry, and vulnerable, and that tending it is an act of responsibility, skill, and respect for life itself. You practice transferring small embers from reed to clay pot, the faint glow reflecting softly on your gloves, the straw mattress, and the shelves, and with each careful motion, a sense of quiet accomplishment builds, a deep understanding of the delicate balance between care and neglect, warmth and frost, life and hardship. Wulfrun explains that every flame carries knowledge, history, and survival, and that medieval villagers relied on this quiet mastery to endure months of cold, darkness, and isolation. And you begin to feel a connection not only to him, but to every apprentice, every ember keeper, every villager who has walked these paths before you. For survival was never about heroics, only about patience, observation, and careful attention to the smallest things. The soft orange glow fills the room, shadows dancing gently across the stone walls and straw, blending with the pale light outside, creating a world that is both fragile and enduring, calm yet alive. And as you finally sit back and watch the small flames pulse steadily, you understand that fire is more than warmth, more than sustenance, it a quiet, enduring lesson in patience, respect, and the art of surviving even the harshest winters. As the pale winter light fades slowly into the muted hues of evening, the stone workshop grows warmer with the gentle glow of the clay pot embers you have tended all day. Their soft orange flicker painting long, dancing shadows across the shelves, bundles of reeds, and stacked firewood. And as you kneel beside Master Wulfrun, the keeper of embers, a profound sense of calm settles over you, a quiet understanding that the flame before you is more than fire, it is life, continuity, and the rhythm of survival in a world that does not forgive carelessness. Wulfrun speaks softly, his voice blending with the faint crackle of the embers, explaining that the night demands vigilance, for cold and darkness are patient enemies, creeping quietly into every corner, and that each ember preserved tonight carries warmth, sustenance, and hope for tomorrow. And as you carefully feed the flame, adjusting straw and coaxing the glow with gentle breaths, you feel the weight of responsibility, the realization that survival is earned, not given, that each careful motion can mean the difference between comfort and hardship, warmth and exposure, and life and despair. Outside, the frozen village is silent, roofs and paths glinting faintly under the pale light of the emerging stars, the cold, sharp, yet serene. And you sense the contrast between the quiet persistence of the ember and the harsh indifference of winter, a delicate balance that demands respect, patience, and mindfulness. Lessons Wulfrun has imparted without hurry, with quiet precision, so that every apprentice who has kneeled here before you has absorbed the rhythm of survival as a living, breathing art. The night deepens, shadows stretching long across the stone floor, and you realize that tending fire is not simply a practical skill, but a meditation, a slow, deliberate practice that teaches observation, patience, and respect for the smallest things. For it is in these small, repetitive acts, feeding the ember, monitoring its glow, transferring it carefully, that life persists in a world ruled by cold and darkness. And as you watch the soft, steady light pulsate within its clay vessel, a calm satisfaction washes over you, the kind that comes not from accomplishment alone, but from understanding, connection, and alignment with a rhythm older than yourself. Wolfram moves quietly around the workshop, checking other embers, adjusting the placement of wood, inspecting the clay vessels with care, each motion deliberate, measured, and you follow in silence, absorbing the tempo, the ritual, and the profound significance of these acts. By the time the evening meal is prepared and the final embers fed, the hut is filled with a warm, steady light, a quiet testament to patience, knowledge, and centuries of survival. And as you finally sit back, fingers warmed by the gentle glow, eyes softened by the amber light, you understand that the true lesson of the keeper of embers is not only about flame, but about life itself, that even in the harshest winters, with careful attention, respect, and the quiet practice of small, deliberate acts, survival is possible, enduring, and profoundly human, and that every flicker of light you have nurtured today carries with it the heartbeat of generations, a soft, steady rhythm that will guide the village and you through every dark, frost-bound night to come. The pale light of a winter morning stretches across the village, frost sparkling faintly on thatched roofs and narrow cobblestone paths, while a soft, brittle silence holds the streets, broken only by the distant lowing of cattle and the crunch of boots on frozen earth. And as you walk behind Master Wolfram, the keeper of embers, you notice how every detail of the village, from stacked firewood to neatly bundled straw, has been arranged with quiet intention, a reflection of centuries of knowledge woven into survival itself. He leads you past the stone cottages, their smoke curling lazily from chimneys, past the frozen well where a villager draws water with careful patience, and past the midden heap where the subtle tang of earth and decay lingers, teaching you that even the smallest parts of village life hold lessons in resilience, observation, and care. For the survival of each household depends on more than just fire, it depends on rhythm, foresight, and a deep understanding of the environment. And as you follow, absorbing the crisp air and the muted sounds of labor, you feel the weight of these lessons settle in your mind, a quiet reverence for the patience, skill, and thought embedded in every action. Wolfram pauses beside a small wooden fence bordering a frozen field, pointing out the delicate frost patterns that reveal hidden moisture beneath, the tracks of animals scavenging for sustenance, and the subtle changes in tree branches indicating the direction of prevailing winds, showing you that survival extends beyond warmth, that observation, understanding, and responsiveness are as critical as tending the ember. And as you crouch to examine the small tracks yourself, a sense of awe and humility fills you, the realization that the world is both fragile and harsh, beautiful and indifferent, yet survival is possible when one reads it carefully, with attention and respect. Villagers begin to stir more fully now, small figures moving deliberately, to tend animals, gather supplies, and prepare the day's tasks. Each action performed with quiet efficiency, none wasted, each motion an echo of centuries of accumulated knowledge. And you sense that this rhythm, slow, deliberate, and patient, is the invisible thread that binds the village together, that links each family, each apprentice, and each keeper to the heartbeat of survival itself. Wulfrun demonstrates how to inspect food stores, selecting dried herbs and grains for cooking, noting subtle signs of moisture or spoilage, and how the careful rotation of supplies can mean the difference between feast and famine in the harsh months ahead. And as you help him carry small bundles to the workshop, the faint warmth of yesterday's embers radiating from clay pots, you feel a deep understanding that life here depends on preparation, observation, and the quiet, repetitive acts of tending, storing, and adjusting. For it is in these small, deliberate moments that survival is woven from patience, attention, and knowledge, a rhythm older than any one person, yet alive in every frost-crusted roof, every careful footprint, every ember glowing steadily in the village huts. As the sun rises higher, the cold remains sharp, but inside you, there is a quiet warmth born not only from knowledge, but from understanding, a sense that survival is not frantic or heroic, but meditative, deliberate, and quietly enduring, and that the lessons beyond careful observation, respect for the environment, attention to detail, and thoughtful action are as essential as any flame, carrying with them the heartbeat of the village and the rhythm of life itself. The soft winter light filters through bare branches as you and Master Wulfrun step beyond the village outskirts, into a world where frost-laden grass crunches underfoot and every sound the distant call of a bird, the subtle rustle of a small animal carries meaning. And he instructs you to slow, to observe carefully, to notice the details that are invisible to the untrained eye. For survival here depends as much on knowing the land as it does on tending embers. He stops beside a patch of frozen soil and points out tiny green shoots barely breaking through the snow, explaining how medieval villagers learned to recognize edible plants even in the harshest months, and how the subtle changes in bark, moss, or the angle of fallen branches can reveal hidden water sources or shelter. And as you crouch to study these signs, a quiet reverence fills you, realizing that knowledge of the land is accumulated slowly over years, and that every observation is a form of preparation, a small act of wisdom passed down through generations. Wulfrun moves with calm precision, demonstrating how to select roots without damaging the plant, how to gather herbs without disturbing the delicate balance of the ecosystem, and how even tiny fragments of moss or lichen could provide warmth or medicinal benefit in emergencies. And you practice carefully, hands stiff with cold, mind alert, learning that every detail matters, that survival is never hasty or careless, but deliberate, measured, and intentional. The forest itself seems alive with silent instruction. The angle of snow on a branch shows where the wind will blow next. The faint footprints of foxes reveal hunting patterns, and the low hum of water under thin ice suggests streams not yet frozen solid, all waiting to be read, interpreted, and used to preserve life. And Wulfrun emphasizes that modern conveniences have dulled these skills, yet they were once essential, Their subtle mastery, the difference between thriving and perishing in winter. As you move from patch to patch, selecting small bundles of roots and herbs, observing the quiet rhythm of nature, you sense a deep connection to the land. 2 centuries of villagers who read it with patience, care, and respect. Their survival entwined with knowledge that modern tools cannot replicate. And you begin to understand that fire is only one element of endurance. The rest woven from careful observation, forethought, and gentle interaction with the environment. When at last you pause to examine your gathered foraging, Wulfrun reminds you that this is not merely collection, it is a dialogue with the land, a patient conversation where attention, respect, and deliberate action allow life to persist. And as you look around at the frost-covered forest, listening to the subtle sounds of hidden life, you feel a quiet satisfaction. The knowledge settling into your bones that survival is more than warmth, it is understanding, observation, and the careful, meditative attention to every small, vital detail. A rhythm that continues long after the fire has been banked and the night has fallen. A steady heartbeat connecting the apprentice, the keeper, and the enduring village itself. The pale winter light begins to soften as you follow Master Wulfrun deeper into the outskirts of the village, where small stone and timber structures lie half hidden among snow-dusted fields, and he gestures to the careful construction of each, showing how medieval villagers designed their shelters not for comfort alone, but for endurance, for retaining heat, with thatched roofs angled precisely to shed snow, walls thick enough to block the bitter wind, and doors small and low to trap warmth inside. And as you kneel to inspect a corner of straw bedding, the faint smell of smoke still lingering from last night's hearth, you realize that survival extends beyond fire or food. Diet is preparation, foresight, and understanding of the environment. And every stone, every bundle of straw, every careful layer of clay or turf reflects generations of accumulated knowledge. Wulfrun shows how to reinforce weak spots in walls, how to insulate doorways with bundles of straw, and how to create small, vented openings that allow smoke from the hearth to escape without losing precious warmth. And you practice each motion, your hands stiff but precise, feeling the rhythm of centuries of labor encoded in these structures, and learning that patience and observation are as crucial as skill. For one poorly placed beam or hastily arranged bundle could mean frostbite, lost sleep, or wasted energy in the harsh winter months. Beyond the technical aspects, Wulfrun teaches subtle lessons in anticipation, showing how to store supplies near the fire, how to position clay vessels to maximize heat, and how to rotate wood and straw to ensure nothing goes to waste. And as you move around the small building, adjusting and observing, you notice the careful choreography of medieval life, each motion calculated, each item placed with intention, every action designed to protect warmth, preserve energy, and maintain rhythm. Outside, frost glistens on rooftops and paths, the faint tracks of villagers and animals weaving silent stories in the snow. And you sense how intimately survival is tied to understanding these small signals, these subtle hints in the environment. Meditative practice where attention and care create security and neglect can be fatal. As you complete the tasks, checking each bundle, reinforcing each corner, Wulfrun emphasizes that preparation is not a one-time act, but a continuous rhythm, a repeated, deliberate cycle that ensures the village endures through winter's cruelty. And you begin to feel the weight and meaning of every motion, every observation, every careful choice, realizing that life here is preserved not by strength alone, but by patience, foresight, and respect for the small, essential acts that form the foundation of survival. By the time the sun tilts toward the horizon, you feel a quiet satisfaction, the rhythm of preparation, observation, and careful work settling into your bones, a steady heartbeat connecting you to the village, the keeper, and the generations who came before. A profound understanding that shelter, like fire, is more than comforted, is life, and survival is the deliberate, patient practice of tending every detail with care. The pale light of late morning filters through the frosted trees as you and Master Wolfram approach the village, well, the thin crust of ice on its surface reflecting faintly in the cold sunlight, and he gestures for you to kneel beside him, demonstrating how medieval villagers carefully collected, preserved, and rationed water to survive the harsh months, showing that life depended not only on warmth, but also on vigilance, attention, and foresight. He explains the subtle techniques of keeping water from freezing too quickly, using small coverings, slow rotation, and careful layering to ensure the household always had liquid for cooking, cleaning, and warming. And as you mimic his movements, hands cold against frozen wood, you feel the rhythm of survival sinking in, the deliberate, slow cadence of each motion reinforcing patience and focus. Beyond water, Wolfram guides you to inspect stored food, dried roots, salted meat, grains, and herbs, showing how medieval villagers preserved each item, how they checked for moisture, mold, and spoilage, how rotation and careful layering could prolong life through months of scarcity. And you realize that survival is not just tending fire, but managing every resource, every tiny bundle, every hidden pot or jar, with respect and attention. He teaches subtle skills like reading the faint signs of frost or damp in grain, selecting only the most durable roots, and storing herbs near heat sources without risking burn or spoilage. Lessons that require observation, repetition, and patience, a rhythm that ties the household together. And as you handle each carefully preserved bundle, your understanding grows. The quiet satisfaction of competence mingling with reverence for centuries of accumulated knowledge. Wolfram shows how even small animals and foraged foods were used wisely, emphasizing that nothing is wasted in winter, that every resource, no matter how humble, has a role in sustaining life, and that knowledge of the land, weather, and seasons is as vital as tending the ember or building a solid shelter. And as you practice cutting, layering, and arranging supplies, you feel the quiet discipline of medieval life imprint itself on your mind, a gentle yet insistent lesson in foresight, patience, and balance. Outside, frost glints on rooftops and paths. Distant birds call softly, and the occasional footprints of animals remind you that survival requires constant attention to the rhythms of life, the cycles of cold and warmth, scarcity and abundance, observation and action, and that mastering these rhythms, balancing fire, shelter, water, and food, is the heartbeat of the village. By the time your tasks are complete, the the sun tilts toward the horizon, casting pale, soft light through the village, and you feel the full weight and beauty of this knowledge, that survival is a delicate, patient practice, a rhythm of care, observation, and deliberate action, and that life here in this frozen village endures not by luck, but by centuries of accumulated skill, quiet foresight, and the gentle, careful tending of every flame, every pot, and every bundle that sustains warmth, nourishment, and hope through the harshest winter months. As the pale winter sun dips toward the horizon, casting soft, muted light over frost-laden rooftops and cobblestone streets, you return with Master Wolfron to the stone workshop, carrying small bundles of firewood, carefully preserved food, and gathered herbs. And as the door closes behind you, the familiar warm glow of clay pot embers greets you, soft orange light filling the room and painting long, gentle shadows across the walls, shelves, and straw bedding, and you feel a deep sense of calm settle over you, a quiet understanding that the day's careful labor, observation, and preparation has preserved life itself, and that survival in this medieval village is a deliberate, measured rhythm where every small act matters. Wolfram moves deliberately, demonstrating the evening rituals of tending embers, checking each clay pot, adding a small piece of dry straw, and adjusting the glow with careful, almost meditative breaths, and you follow his motions, hands stiff but precise, understanding that these acts are not just routine, they are life-saving, the heartbeat of the household, the rhythm that allows warmth, nourishment, and hope to endure through the darkest, coldest nights. He shows you how to organize supplies near the fire, rotate preserved foods, and arrange tools and herbs for maximum efficiency, emphasizing that foresight, observation, and attention to detail are as crucial as tending the ember itself, and that neglecting any small element can ripple outward, creating hardship, wasted energy, or worse, exposure to cold and scarcity. Outside, the village grows quiet, footsteps fading, animals settling, frost glinting softly under the dim light, and you feel the weight of centuries of knowledge pressing gently upon you. The unbroken rhythm of survival from one generation to the next, a patient meditation of preparation and care, a subtle but powerful practice that has preserved life for hundreds of winters. You kneel beside a small clay pot, adjusting straw and coaxing the glow with gentle breaths, feeling the ember respond, and realize that fire, food, water, shelter, and observation are all threads in a delicate tapestry, each interwoven with patience, attention, and understanding, and that the apprentice's duty is to maintain this rhythm, to respect it, and to carry it forward, quietly, deliberately, and without haste. Wolfram speaks softly of reflection, encouraging you to consider the day's work, noting successes and failures, observing patterns in the land, the frost, the embers, and the supplies, teaching that even in winter, there is a gentle feedback loop that rewards patience, care, and mindfulness, and that understanding this loop is essential to enduring long months of cold and darkness. By the time the day concludes, the soft glow of the embers illuminates the workshop with a warm, steady light, and you sit back on the straw, hands warmed, eyes softened by the orange glow, feeling a quiet satisfaction and a deep connection to the rhythm of life in this village, understanding that survival is not dramatic, not heroic, but deliberate, patient, and continuous, and that every small, careful act, whether feeding a flame, rotating food, or observing the foresters, part of an unbroken chain of life, a meditation in motion, and a testament to the enduring wisdom of centuries of villagers who thrived in the coldest, darkest winters. The first light of winter dawn stretches across the frost-covered village, soft and pale, casting long shadows across the frozen rooftops. And you rise from your straw bedding, the chill in the air sharp against your skin, remembering the lessons of fire, shelter, and sustenance from the previous days. And following Master Wolfred, the keeper of embers, you step into the crisp morning with quiet reverence, each breath visible in the cold air, each movement deliberate, for you now understand that survival in this world is measured not in haste or heroics, but in careful, repeated actions, observation, and patience. The village is slowly awakening faint sounds of livestock, distant footsteps, and the subtle crackle of wood meeting frost accompany your steps, and Wolfren points out small details, teaching you to read the land, to notice tracks, subtle changes in frost patterns, and the angle of the sun filtering through bare branches, showing that survival is a meditation, a careful dance with the rhythms of nature that rewards attention and punishes neglect. As you help carry small bundles of firewood, inspect the clay pot embers, and rotate preserved food, the repetition of these acts begins to feel almost sacred, a slow rhythm that connects apprentice to keeper, and you feel the weight of centuries of accumulated knowledge, each small action carrying the legacy of villagers who endured bitter winters long before you, teaching you that mastery is not simply about skill, but about consistency, awareness, and respect. Wolfren instructs you in preparing the hearth for the day, tending embers with precise breaths, feeding them just enough, and adjusting straw and wood with gentle care. And as you mimic his motions, the flame responds, steady and warm, a tangible heartbeat of survival that fills the workshop with soft orange light, blending with the pale daylight coming through the small window. And you understand that fire is more than warmth, it is life, continuity, and the rhythm that sustains the village through darkness and frost. Outside, frost sparkles on rooftops and paths, and you notice the subtle interplay of shadow and light, tracks of animals, and the quiet movements of villagers tending to their routines, all teaching you that observation and responsiveness are as critical as tending fire or preparing food, for the environment is a living, breathing system, full of hidden signals and lessons waiting to be read with patience and respect. As you move through these morning rituals, carrying clay pot embers, checking supplies, and observing the village, a quiet satisfaction settles into your chest, the steady rhythm of deliberate, patient work embedding itself into your mind, and you feel the connection to every apprentice, keeper, and villager who came before, understanding that mastery of survival is not a moment but a continuous process, a rhythm of attention, foresight, and gentle care, and that by embracing this cadence, you have begun to truly become part of the living heartbeat of the village, where warmth, food, water, shelter, and understanding of the land converge to preserve life even in the harshest winters. A legacy of endurance, patience, and quiet wisdom that you now carry with you, step by deliberate step into the frozen dawn. The morning unfolds slowly, the pale winter sun casting soft light across the frozen village streets. And as you follow Master Wolfram through the familiar path, each step crunching on frost-hardened earth, you feel the rhythm of the village settling into your bones, a deliberate cadence of work, observation, and quiet care, where every motion, every decision is part of the delicate, unbroken chain of survival that has endured for centuries. Wolfram instructs you in the daily routines, checking embers in clay pots, feeding them with small, careful puffs of breath, rotating wood, inspecting preserved food, and observing the subtle signs of frost and animal tracks in the field sand. You realize that these acts, repeated meticulously each day, form the backbone of life here, the heartbeat that sustains warmth, nourishment, and hope through the harshest winter months, and that even the smallest oversight, a forgotten bundle of straw or spoiled food can, ripple outward, threatening the entire household. You kneel beside the glowing clay pots, adjusting straw and coaxing embers with soft, deliberate breaths, and feel the weight of responsibility settle into your hands, understanding that survival is both a physical and mental discipline, requiring observation, foresight, and patience, and that mastery comes not from haste or brute force, but from a quiet, meditative attention to every detail, every movement, and every choice. Outside, the frost glimmers faintly in the pale sunlight. The village stirs with measured activity, and you notice subtle rhythms, the way smoke rises from chimneys, the angle of shadows across frozen rooftops, the small, deliberate movements of villagers tending livestock or gathering water, all teaching you that life here is a balance between understanding, preparation, and action, a slow, meditative flow where attention to detail ensures survival, and where the apprentice must synchronize with these rhythms to thrive. Wolfram speaks softly about foresight, about anticipating the day's challenges, about reading the land, the weather, and the frost to make decisions that preserve life. And you begin to see that this knowledge, accumulated over generations, is as vital as the flame itself, and that each small, repeated act, feeding an ember, layering straw, rotating food, observing tracks, a meditation in endurance, a deliberate practice that sustains the village. As the morning continues, you find yourself moving with the rhythm, hands steady, eyes attentive, mind aware, absorbing the patterns of the world around you, and a quiet satisfaction fills your chest, the deep contentment of aligning with the deliberate, patient cadence of life here, understanding that survival is not dramatic or heroic, but continuous, measured, and grounded in observation, care, and repetition. And that mastery of this rhythm is the ultimate skill of the keeper's apprentice, the invisible thread connecting you to every villager, every ember, and every winter endured over centuries. A rhythm that will carry you safely through even the coldest, darkest days, a steady heartbeat of life itself. The late morning air is crisp and carries the faint, lingering scent of smoke mixed with frozen earth. And as you walk alongside Master Wolfram through the frost-covered village, he begins to teach you the subtle art of medieval tools and techniques, the quiet, deliberate methods honed over generations to preserve life in a world without matches, lighters, or modern conveniences, and you begin to notice how each tool, from the simple wooden tongs to hollow reeds, clay vessels, and carefully stacked firewood, serves a precise, almost sacred purpose, designed to maximize efficiency while conserving precious energy. And Wolfram demonstrates with slow, measured movements how to coax a tiny ember into steady flame using the reed, how to rotate logs to sustain warmth without losing heat, and how to manipulate clay vessels to protect delicate embers from cold drafts. Every motion meditative, teaching patience as much as technique. He instructs you in the preparation of straw for insulation, showing how to weave and layer it to trap warmth while avoiding moisture that could destroy a hearth. And as you mimic his movements, you feel the rhythm of survival embedding itself in your mind, body, and hands, each small act deliberate, exacting, and essential. A quiet choreography linking apprentice to keeper, and past generations of villagers whose lives depended on these skills. Wolfram moves on to food and water, teaching how to layer grains to prevent spoilage, inspect herbs and roots for subtle signs of rot, and arrange supplies for easy access while preserving maximum longevity. Explaining that nothing in the village is wasted, that every item, no matter how humble, is part of a delicate, interconnected system where neglect can have serious consequences. And as you follow his precise instructions, a sense of awe and responsibility fills you. The awareness that mastery comes not from speed or force, but from careful observation, repetition, and respect for the natural rhythms of the environment. Outside, frost glints on rooftops, footprints trace subtle paths across the village, and the quiet movements of neighbors tending animals, drawing water, and gathering supplies create an ambient rhythm that mirrors the careful precision inside the workshop, reinforcing the lesson that survival is holistic, each action affecting the whole system, and that the apprentice must learn to synchronize with these patterns to thrive. You spend hours practicing, adjusting straw, rotating clay pots, coaxing embers, inspecting herbs, observing frost patterns, and carefully noting the smallest signs of change in the environment. Feeling the deep connection between your attention and the continuity of life in the village. A meditative practice that is both practical and profoundly grounding, teaching the patience, foresight, and mindfulness that are essential for enduring winter. And gradually, the rhythm becomes natural, embedded in your very movements, your breathing, your awareness. A seamless integration of tool, technique, and observation that allows survival to become second nature. As you step back to observe the glowing clay pots, the neatly arranged firewood, and the carefully rotated food, a quiet satisfaction fills your chest. The understanding that the village endures not by luck, but by centuries of accumulated knowledge, deliberate repetition, and the careful, respectful use of every tool and technique, and that mastery is not about heroics, but about patience, observation, and the meditative rhythm of tending, maintaining, and preserving the delicate balance that sustains life, warmth, and hope through the long, cold winters, a lesson as enduring, steady, and essential as the flame pulsing softly in the clay pot before you. The pale winter afternoon stretches across the frost-covered village and surrounding fields, soft light glinting off icy rooftops and frozen paths. And as you walk with Master Wolfram, the keeper of embers. He begins to teach you the subtle art of reading signs in the natural world, a skill as critical as tending fire or storing food. For survival in this harsh climate depends on observing the smallest details, interpreting the faintest signals, and understanding patterns that most would overlook. He points out delicate frost patterns on the frozen soil, explaining how their formation hints at hidden moisture beneath the surface, subtle shifts in snow on branches that reveal prevailing wind direction, and faint animal tracks that indicate where food or danger lies. And as you kneel to study each mark, a quiet reverence fills you, realizing that the land itself is alive with instructions. Each frozen footprint, frost crystal, and bending branch, a message to be read carefully, patiently, and respectfully. Wulfrun teaches that medieval villagers depended on this knowledge to plan their days, ration resources, and anticipate challenges. Understanding that the environment is a living, breathing system where every subtle change can signal frost, thaw, or hidden hazards, and that failing to notice these signs could mean wasted effort, cold exposure, or loss of precious resources. And as you mimic his observations, crouching to inspect soil, moss, and tracks, you feel a deep connection to centuries of humans who survived by harmonizing with these rhythms. Their survival built upon quiet attention and disciplined observation. Outside, the village hums faintly with daily tasks: the creak of timber, the soft shuffle of boots, the lowing of animals, and you notice the interplay between human activity and nature, how every small action affects the environment. And Wulfrun emphasizes that reading these signs is not passive, but active participation, a dialogue where careful interpretation and deliberate response guide decisions that preserve warmth, nourishment, and life. As you move from field to forest edge, observing frozen streams, moss-covered stones, and tracks of hidden animals, he instructs you to anticipate weather, adjust resource allocation, and prepare shelter with foresight. And you begin to feel the meditative rhythm of this practice, the blending of awareness, care, and action, where each observation informs the next, and the cycle of preparation, vigilance, and maintenance becomes intuitive, steady, and deeply satisfying. The soft, pale light filters through bare branches, illuminating frost crystals and casting long shadows on the frozen ground. And as you pause to reflect on the day's lessons, a quiet sense of mastery fills you. The understanding that survival is as much about attention and interpretation as it is about fire, food, and shelter. And that by learning to read the subtle signs in the world around you, you gain the ability to act deliberately, efficiently, and safely, preserving life through knowledge, patience, and careful observation. And that this skill, combined with the rhythms of fire tending, resource management, and environmental respect, completes the apprentice's foundation, embedding within you the meditative, enduring, and life-sustaining patterns of the village, a silent, continuous heartbeat that connects you to generations past, present, and future, and ensures that even the coldest, darkest winters can be faced with quiet confidence, awareness, and resilience. The pale evening sun casts soft orange light across the frost-covered village, long shadows stretching over cobblestone streets and thatched rooftops. And as you return to the stone workshop with Master Wulfrun, a profound sense of understanding settles over you. the culmination of days spent learning the delicate rhythms of survival, from tending embers to observing the land, managing food and water, and mastering tools and shelter. And now, as the keeper guides you through the final evening rituals, you feel the full weight of responsibility and the quiet satisfaction of competence. The realization that mastery is not a moment of triumph, but the accumulation of patient, deliberate practice over time. Wolfram demonstrates the evening tending of clay pot embers, the careful layering of straw, and the rotation of preserved food with precision. Each action performed as a meditation, a slow, deliberate rhythm designed to sustain life. And as you mimic his movements, you notice your own confidence growing, your hands steady, your mind alert and aware, the ember responding readily to your careful coaxing, the warmth radiating into your fingers, a tangible heartbeat of survival that fills the workshop and your spirit alike. Outside, frost glimmers faintly under the dimming sky, the village silent but for distant animal calls and the soft rustle of wind. And you feel the interconnectedness of every element, the straw, the food, the water, and the subtle signs of the environment, all forming an intricate system that has allowed generations to endure the harshest winters. And you understand that your role as apprentice is now to carry forward this knowledge with care, patience, and vigilance, ensuring that the rhythm continues unbroken. Wolfram speaks quietly about reflection and foresight, encouraging you to consider each day's work, note successes and mistakes, and learn from the subtle cues in the land, the frost, and the ember. And as you absorb his words, you recognize that mastery is a living, breathing process, a meditative dialogue between human and environment, where every small, deliberate act contributes to continuity, warmth, and sustenance, and that even in darkness and cold, survival depends on steady attention, patience, and respect. You move around the workshop, checking embers, rotating food, adjusting straw, and inspecting herbs, each motion precise, deliberate, and mindful, feeling a quiet satisfaction in your growing competence, a sense of alignment with the rhythms of life that have sustained the village for centuries. And as you pause to watch the glowing clay pots illuminate the stone walls and straw bedding, you feel the subtle pulse of generations, past, present, and future flowing through your hands and mind, a steady, enduring heartbeat connecting apprentice to keeper and keeper to village. By the time night fully settles, the workshop is filled with soft, steady light, warmth, and the quiet confidence of preparation and knowledge. And you understand that you have begun the journey from apprentice to keeper, not through force or heroics, but through observation, patience, repetition, and careful attention to every detail, a rhythm that ensures life, safety, and endurance through the long frozen winters, a living, meditative practice that will guide the village and your own footsteps for years to come. And that this quiet mastery, slow and deliberate, is the true heartbeat of survival?